Zweig Group invites all AEC industry leaders to the 2024 AEC Small Business and Entrepreneurship Forum, the premier event for small firms in the AEC sector. Experience innovative strategies and insights on May 21st, crafted by Zweig Group's industry experts. Engage in keynotes and interactive sessions focused on recruitment, retention, and business growth. Join Zweig Group for this unique networking opportunity and take your business to new heights. Secure your spot today and be part of the AEC industry's future. Visit zweiggroup.com for more information. The Zweig Group team looks forward to welcoming you.
Welcome to the Zweig Letter Podcast, putting architectural, engineering, planning, and environmental consulting advice and guidance in your ear. Zweig Group's team of experts have spent more than 3 decades elevating the industry by helping AEP and environmental consulting firms thrive. And these podcasts deliver invaluable management, industry, client, marketing, and HR advice directly to you, free of charge. The Zweig Letter Podcasts, elevating the design industry one episode at a time.
Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of the Zweig Letter Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I'm excited today. I'm here with Greg Graves. Greg is the former CEO of Burns McDonnell, just an all-around great guy and someone that I had a chance to check out from afar online, as we do when we go to Dr. Google and as we talk to other people that know people in the industry. But Greg comes highly recommended, and he's an individual that has just not allowed any grass to grow under his feet, even though he is technically retired. And Greg is doing a lot of great things up in the Kansas City area, and he is currently working on a book, which we're going to talk about. And he's worked on a number of things, but I'd like to just introduce Greg Graves, former CEO of Burns McDonnell, to the audience here at the Zweig Letter Podcast. So without further ado, Greg Graves, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Randy, and thanks for having me on. And since you checked me out on Google, I'm glad that none of the bad stories have hit there yet.
No, none at all. Actually, I found some really cool videos. I found some stuff in the archives. You'd be surprised what's out there, and things that you have forgotten about, people can find, which is kind of cool. But I think it will lend, the information that I gained will lend itself to our conversation today. But I'd love for you just to tell our audience a little bit about yourself, how you came to end up as the CEO of Burns McDonnell, a very well-respected company in the design industry. And I would just love for you to just kind of share for people your superhero origin story, as I like to call it.
Okay, so Deanna and I are just a couple of South Dakota kids. I grew up in southeast South Dakota, small town. She grew up about 20 minutes from Mount Rushmore in the Black Hills of South Dakota. I went to the only engineering school my parents could afford to send me to, which was the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology in Rapid City, where I met Deanna. We got married way too young, but got lucky that it worked for us. In the late 1970s, every engineering and construction firm in America was hiring. It was the middle of the space race. It was the middle of the missile race, the nuclear race between America and Russia. And so everybody was hiring, and we had offers all over the country. But to be truthful, moving to an LA or a Houston was a big move for a couple of kids who'd only been out of state a couple of times.
Yeah.
And so we drove our one car to Kansas City, Missouri, and took the job that was offered by Burns McDonnell. We did not know a single soul. On my first day, June 30th, 1980.
Wow.
The company went over, had good times and bad times, but in the first few years, the company was owned by Armco Steel. And we were fortunate enough in the mid-1980s, when the steel business in America was absolutely, catastrophic, that they sold off anything they could find for cash. And one of those was Burns McDonnell. And in 1986, Burns McDonnell became employee owned. I worked at Burns McDonnell for all 38 years of my career. I was one of those lucky kids that I got to have 7 different jobs, but all at the same place. And through a combination of hustle and probably a little bit of skill and a lot of backing from my family and a few good timing issues, I became the chief executive officer of the company in 2004 and was lucky enough to have a good run as the CEO and chairman for 13 years. I remember a Harvard study that came out about the time that I took over that said no company should ever have a CEO for more than 7 years because they'll run out of ideas and they'll run out of steam. And I'm not so certain that isn't true to a certain extent, but I vowed that it wouldn't happen to me. And so I took early retirement at the end of 2016. I vowed that when the next person was ready, then it's time for you to go.
Yeah.
And so after those 13 years, I retired, and somebody told me the most important thing not to do when you retire is retire. And so I've taken on about anything that anybody ever asked me to do. I'd chair the board of a giant hospital system here in Kansas City, University of Kansas Health System, 11,000 employees, obviously going through a very difficult year with COVID. I chair or vice chair several other boards, including a private school in Kansas City. I'm the lead director for a large public company. And then my main passion over the last 2 years has been a ranch property that Deanna and I are developing. And most importantly, my book titled Create Amazing that will come out next spring.
Wow. I mean, I'm just getting...
That's enough.
That's a lot. Yeah, that is a lot. So, man, so you have done, you've done a lot. You had 7 jobs. I don't know. I'm trying to decide where I want to start, but I think I do know where I want to start because I think it will lead to a couple of other things. So I do want to get to the book, and I do want to talk about some of the other endeavors that you've put your mind to. But you're absolutely right. I've heard it said before, and watching my grandfather as he grew older, he told me, I'm not retiring until I die. And he literally worked until he was 84 years old. He only stopped working because he had a mild stroke, and we would not allow him to drive into New York City anymore. He used to work at the United Nations as a reporter. So, it was hard to take that license from him. And only then did we ever see a true decline. And it was just because his why really wasn't there any longer. And so I think that's great. So my advice to you, and as I always tell people that will listen when I talk to them, I'm never retiring, and I'm taking a card from my grandfather's playbook. So I certainly encourage you with that, and I say kudos to you.
The biggest difference, Randy, is that no one pays you anymore.
No, yes,
that's the only problem.
That is the difference. Yes, so you got to save your coins. So that there is that, and my grandfather was really good about that. That's for sure. But so I do want to come back to it because you said something really interesting, and it's almost like an anomaly nowadays. When I talk to young engineers, young design professionals, or architects for that matter, and I talk to them nowadays, I tell guys and gals that you may work at 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 different firms. I mean, you had 7 jobs at one firm, and there is a huge difference there in terms of the way that you came up through the design industry and the way that a lot of these young Gen Z kids that are just coming out of school, as well as millennials, are looking at the arc of their career. And I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are about the juxtaposition between those two variables, what you were able to experience throughout the 80s and 90s, and then, climbing into the chief position, right? You worked your way up, literally worked your way up to the top. What would you say to young people nowadays coming into this industry that feel like, okay, I've got to go and work multiple places before I can really find my place?
Yeah, I think the worst advice young kids get coming out of college, maybe even in any field, but in particular in the design fields, is that work 3 or 4 years and then leave that firm and go to work for another. That's fine advice if you're completely unhappy if you think that company just doesn't get it. But I don't think you really are experienced enough to know the answers to those questions after just a few years. Mm-hmm. And for me, it would have been the worst thing ever to have left the place. And if I think of the happiest, in fact, some research out of Rutgers shows that people who have worked at a firm for a long time tend to be happier than the people who haven't maybe gotten to know that firm yet. And I think the other thing that people don't do is if you're unhappy in your career or maybe at a particular firm after 3 or 4 years, or maybe you have the 7-year itch, go explore your own firm for the opportunities that might exist before you think that opportunity only exists at some other firm. And now you've displaced your family. You don't really know that you're going to be happy at that other place yet, if you will.
Right.
And then depending on what your retirement plan looks like, if you're at an employee-owned firm and you think, and the firm is being a success, you got to be pretty darn sure that it's somewhere that you got to leave or abandon, or use your right words there. For me, there were a couple of times in my career that I ran out of just interest in my current position, if you will. Mm-hmm. And some might have told me that it was time to explore other opportunities or places. And what I found for myself was I always found that opportunity within my place. And Randy, as you know, sometimes you got to be bold within those firms. And if you're a performer, or at least if you're just a hard worker, your human resources department, your boss's boss, they don't want you to leave. They know the cost of replacement. And so they are often the best place to go and say, I might be interested in doing something new, or something that interests me more, somewhere I can make a bigger difference to the company. Think long and hard about before leaving an opportunity that might be the best one you've ever had, and it might just be the one you already have.
Yeah. I mean, that's sagely advice right there. And it is, you really do have to look at the whole picture and not just be a prisoner of your current feelings about things, because feelings are going to change. And I'm sure throughout your years at Burns McDonnell that you had ups and downs, you had highs and lows, and so you went through a myriad of things. What changed for you from an ownership perspective, or how did you look at things when Burns McDonnell changed in '86 and became a company owned or employee owned company?
I admit I was probably pretty typical of the average person who goes to work for an employee owned firm. It sounds good, and you're curious how this thing might work out. But for me, I was out on a field assignment when the transition took place at Burns McDonnell, so I probably didn't get all the cheerleading that the folks in the home office got. And one of the things I talk about in my book in terms of from a managerial or from an executive position, you have to get that employee owner's ESOP account up to a certain level before one day they open up that envelope and they go, whoa, I had no idea that this could work this good. And for me, it was 4 or 5 years that all of a sudden I said, okay, I've been in my 401k now for 10 years, and my ESOP just passed it after 4 years.
Yeah.
And it goes back to when you work for a company like that, you don't have anybody else to give the money to if your employee owned and your company is successful. Yeah. And so our company became employee owned thanks to a former chief executive officer of ours whose name was Newt Campbell. And he used it simply as a tool to survive the transition of our company being sold by Armco Steel. And it took a while, I think, even for those executives to realize, hey, this is something that can really create accumulating wealth for the people who work here, not just for the executives or not just for outside owners over time. And the longer it went, the more I knew and the more I believed. And it wasn't until actually late in my career that I said, we have a duty, now that we've done this and been successful at it, we have a duty outside of our firm to make sure that America realizes all it can gain from employee ownership and not just the people who work at those firms.
Yeah, and I think that is, it's so funny because you're kind of mirroring and echoing the things that I've heard from other leaders of other design firms that have gone over to employee ownership, and just the difference that it's made. And I know before we started recording, we were talking even a little bit about the whole retention factor and how that plays into employee ownership, and just people not having to feel like they have to leave. And if you have a dog in the fight, it's so much harder to give that up for the unknown dog, right? And so it's like, I might as well stay here because this is, I know this, but I don't know what I'm going to get myself into. And I think that there's something to be said for that. I know that there has been, at least in the past few years in the design industry, a movement towards more ESOPs. I mean, there have been more ESOP consultants talking to clients of Zweig Group for years now. And it just seems to be that those numbers have even proliferated even more in the past, 5 or 6 years.
Well, there's 7 million employee owners in America today. And after grocery, design firms is the biggest component of that. And it's because I think professionals tend to be long-term planner types, and they see the advantage of employee ownership over time. And so more and more people are interested in it. And within design firms, the cost of replacing a 7 to 10 year employee can be 1x their salary. And so the advantage to the firm, just forget about the nuisance of having to hire experienced people. The advantage to the firm are just financially of not losing. I was the CEO of Burns McDonnell for 13 years. I had 60 officers within my officer group when I retired. I had one officer of our firm quit our company in my entire 13-year span.
Wow.
And 2 years later, he came back to work for our firm. And so people who've been there for a while, it almost all but eliminates. If you're good at this at all, you're going to be successful at reducing your turnover rate well below half of the national average. And what it did for Burns McDonnell was, once we were able to reduce the turnover of executives and long-term employees, it let us focus all of our recruiting on new grads.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, the best new employee at Burns McDonnell every year was a new grad. Now, we didn't know which one it was yet, but the best way to improve your firm talent-wise, new grads. The best way to overcome diversity issues at your firm, and almost all design firms in America tend to be way overly dominant white male. The best way to improve those numbers is on college campuses, where diversity is at least making some headway. You want to bring new ideas in. You want to bring people in from different geographies. You want to grow your regional office groups. You want people who are more interested in international assignments than people who've been around for a while. New grads. And so we were able to focus our whole recruiting program on how do we bring in 100 to 150 new graduates every year from all around the country. And the talent level just exploded. In fact, there were a lot of them that I was glad we hired them after I had the job, because they were immediately in my office measuring for new drapes,
It's like my turn will come next. So, yeah, no, I really appreciate that, because I think that, and it's something that I've said to firms all the time, is that it's so hard for an average design firm to really hyper focus on getting that new crop of engineers or architects coming right out of school when you're still trying to fill positions on some of your mainline needs, because because you're losing, you're the best of the best people. And that I think has always been a problem for a lot of firms, as to how do we shore that up. And I've always told them that you have to constantly be priming the pump at that graduate at that graduate level where people are just getting out of school. And then, if you can work on some other things or incorporate something like an employee ownership program that gives people a piece of the pie, if you will, then it's a lot easier for you to start dealing with all of the different experiences and feelings that you're going to encounter with the people that work for you.
Sure, and almost every design firm in America has some semblance of a summer internship program.
Yeah.
And every college, engineering, architectural, construction management, et cetera, design student is looking for a summer internship program. Some after their freshman year, but for sure after their sophomore and junior years. And yeah, it's a cost, but it's an extremely low cost when you get to try them out, if you will.
Right.
But I always said, as important, they get to try us out. They get to see how hard the people at our place work. They get to see how hard the projects that we take on are technically and from a point of view of just being someone who hustles.
Right.
And if they think it's too hard or they just don't want to work that hard, well then, good. I want them to weed me out as an employer, not just me weeding them out. Mm-hmm. We usually had most of our May graduates hired by the previous August at the end of that previous summer's summer internship program. We had a night that we called the Night of Opportunity, and we would invite all the kids who we were making permanent offers in, and we would invite their parents and grandparents. And the parents and grandparents always came, because they're always proud as heck of these kids.
Absolutely.
And I would always man the booth where you talk about employee ownership. And the kids didn't always come to see me, but the parents always came to see me to talk about our employee ownership as a retirement program. And then I'd always see them whispering sweet dollar signs into their kids' ears by the end of the night.
Yeah.
And it was always great fun.
I love that. And I can appreciate that. I mean, my parents, both my parents taught in a very strong public school system where they had a very strong retirement program. And I just remember, my mom served 35 years as a teacher, and I mean, she loved every minute of it. And I look back now at all of the bells and whistles that she got as a and this was as a public school teacher. And then her healthcare package and everything else. I mean, it wasn't just the money, it was everything that made it special. And I think when a company can put together a program or a package that, really can be with someone for the longest period of time, because let's face it, it's just not commonplace these days with firms. I mean, people complain and say, well, those opportunities just don't exist as much anymore.
Well, sure. And even though as an ESOP advocate, I'm not always the biggest American pension system advocate.
Right. My
dad was a teacher, math and science, retired on South Dakota's teacher pension program. And if there's any profession in America that deserves to have an incredible retirement program, it's people who are teaching our kids.
Yeah.
Because we all know they don't get paid much while they're doing it.
Right.
So at least we ought to have a good pension program in place. And my dad actually had a great pension.
Yeah. And frontline healthcare workers. I would add those to the mix. Not so much. I mean, doctors, listen, I got some cousins that are doctors. They're doing quite well for themselves. But I mean, I'm talking about the frontline healthcare workers, the people that are in the waiting rooms, the people that are cleaning up the OR after an operation, and of course, the nurses and orderlies and everybody else that's there. And they do, for all intents and purposes, which is a thankless job, unfortunately. And I know it's been brought to light more now because of COVID-19, but we sometimes forget about those folks. And, I don't know. So
especially this year, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, tell me this. I would love to, I happened to spy out a video that you did a couple of years ago with the Girl Scouts of America. And it was it was a really cool video. And I really liked what you had to say to that young lady. I mean, she wanted to be a nuclear scientist or a fighter pilot. So she had some big ambitions. But I recognized that right away you were talking to her about the importance of getting more women into STEM programs, and just creating more diversity in the design space. This industry, as an African-American male, of course, I have seen it because I've been involved since 97. You've been involved with it much longer than I have. But the level of diversity in this industry is obviously lacking. And I would imagine that, you dealt with it at Burns and McDonnell, but then also now that you've had the perspective of being outside of the organization and as you reflect back, is there anything maybe that you would have done differently, or what recommendations or advice would you be giving to design firm leaders and design firm owners today that are saying, well, I just don't know how to make it diverse. I don't know how to find enough women. I don't know how to find enough African Americans or Latinos or whatever. What would your advice be to them today?
In 2004, I was elected by a board of directors of 4 white, male, Christian, straight men. In 2017, I retired from a board of 6 white, male, Christian, straight men. Complete failure. And while our industry has made some progress on male-female diversity, we have made no or sometimes negative progress in particularly for African-American diversity.
Yeah.
So the Girl Scout program in Kansas City has really been trying to push STEM. And 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, they had a marketing campaign. It was on billboards all over town, recruiting girls into Girl Scouts for its STEM programs. And they went to a few different male CEO types in Kansas City and had them do these videos and billboards, etc. I did one with Sly James, who was the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri at the time, and a really, really good friend. And the program was, I'm man enough to be a Girl Scout. And I met with a Girl Scout in my office one day, and they did a YouTube video of her and I. And she was one of the most brilliant young women you could ever meet. I immediately offered her a job at Burns McDonnell. And what's happening and this has been proven through research, is that inner city African American boys and throughout society, girls, especially when they get to middle school, are told by society, but often in the classroom, that science, other than a few on the healthcare side, but science, they're not good enough, they're not smart enough, they're not going to be interested, you'll never make it to the end. And that attitude that has permeated the American educational system, and very often it's a female teacher mentor that systemically imparts on this young African-American boy or all girls, this isn't a field they're interested in. African-American and women in engineering colleges in America were making some headway in the early 2000s, but now it's actually going the other way.
Yeah.
Again, where women in engineering, I know that number exactly, is down to about 20%. And then when we do get women interested in engineering in school, they tend to gravitate towards areas that aren't the core engineering disciplines: civil, mechanical, structural, electrical. And so they don't always fit into those design firms. My attitude is that those are some of the best excuses I could fall back on, but they are blatant excuses. I did break the barriers for Burns McDonnell in that we had our first African-American regional office manager. We had our first African-American vice president. We had our first female C-level executive who was absolutely fantastic. And you don't have to be in a room long to know that if you have people who all have the same experiences in life, and they all grew up rural South Dakota kids, well, guess what? They all have the same idea when it comes to any problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you need those different lifetime experiences that come geographically, but they also, more importantly, come through your sex, your race, your sexual orientation, your religion, changes the upbringing you had. It changes your view on the world. And when you have different views in the boardroom or in the executive room or in a project, people will come at those problems in different ways. So some people look at the diversity in our industry as something that we have to do.
Yeah.
Those people have it wrong. Some people look at it as something we ought to do. And I think those people have it partially right. But the attitude they should have is, this will make us better. This will make me a better executive. It will make us a better firm. We will come up with better design solutions and best places to work solutions and in just about any area you can consider if we can be more diverse. That doesn't even go to the fact that if we can put in particularly more African Americans in the design fields, we can help at least make some progress on wealth disparity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because our industry pays pretty well. And if it's an employee ownership program, well, then you, by definition, help economic justice in America.
Yeah. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here. No, you're absolutely right. I've gone and spoken to NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers. I'm always amazed, Greg, when I will go out and talk to firms, and I say, "Well, have you recruited at any of the HBCUs?" And every now and then they'll say, "Well, what's an HBCU?" And I'll explain to them a historically Black college or university, and then I'll talk about, well, if you look at North Carolina A&T, or Howard University or Fisk, there are a number of HBCUs that produce some outstanding engineers and architects for that matter. And
yes.
firms just aren't aware of them. And I'm like, we'll just start there and build on it from that. But you're absolutely 100% right. Being more diverse in your recruitment process will help solve a lot of the problems that we are encountering. And not only that, you'll also get a very viable individual that can come help you grow your organization. And I think that, you should also think of it from that perspective. Yes, you're helping somebody else out in their situation, but you're also helping yourself out in the process. And I think
you're making America better, but
yes.
You're making yourself better too.
Absolutely.
You're not just making some philanthropic gift.
Yeah.
No. You're making yourself better too. And I think the more people recognize that, hopefully, Randy, the harder they will work at it.
Yeah, and I think we're there. Obviously, we're at a very at the timing of this recording, we're dealing with the pandemic. We're dealing with social unrest in our country. We're dealing with a lot of factors that are affecting us in so many different ways. And, sometimes I wake up and I'm hoping that this is like, I feel like it's Groundhog Day because every day it's the same thing. It's just, I feel like I'm Bill Murray in that movie. And, but I have hope and I haven't given up the hope. I know some people, I have friends that have, but others that have said, you know what, I'm not going to let things get us down, and I think we can move forward from this. And I do believe that we can do that. And so I see that you have figured out one way to spread a little bit of hope with your book. And could you tell us just a little bit about Create Amazing and why, it's so, you hear it just about a lot of CEOs when they retire, they typically will write a book. But why for you is this such a passionate pursuit?
Employee ownership at Burns McDonnell meant that I got to retire at 58. It meant that I got to put a lot of people into a great retirement. The retirement problem in America is a huge coming tidal wave. 50% of Americans have $0 saved for retirement, and those are often people 55 and up. And as economic and productivity gains have happened in America, it's become the wealth disparity gap is growing. It's growing quickly. And people want to complain about the 1%, if you will. I'm a guy who in my life went from 1% to the other 1%. But the 1% have gained economic strength in America in the last 10 or 15 years. But the top 10% of the wealthiest people in America have exploded versus the bottom 90%. The top 10% of the wealthiest people in America own 67% of the wealth in America. And the bottom 90% own 33% of the wealth in America. Well, no wonder we have a coming retirement crisis. And so Create Amazing, the book, it's subtitled Turning Employees into Owners for Explosive Growth. The subtitle that was given to me by my book agent is a journey for employee owners, for people who are thinking about employee ownership, for people who are thinking about selling their company, hopefully for government officials and just people who are interested in business or the economy, of why, most importantly, why we should consider to have more employee owners in America. So there's about 7 million people who are employee owners in America one way or another. Out of 132 million people in America who have a job.
Right.
Now you have to take out maybe people who work for the government or people who work for nonprofits, but about 100 million people in America could work at firms that are employee-owned. And if you just doubled the number of employee owners in America, you would make huge progress on wealth disparity. So my argument and why in the book subtitles are very, very reaching. They're why, what, who, and how. And then a little bit of fun on both ends. But in the chapter why, there's a description of why pushing for more employee ownership in America is in the best interest of the individual. It's in the best interest of our country from the point of view of economic justice. Mm-hmm. And even if you don't want to give me into those, it makes America more productive. It makes America more competitive. It goes all the way back to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, the more we learn about Thomas Jefferson, he may have not been that good of a guy. But that doesn't change the fact that his brilliance on making American farmers owners, giving them property and then saying, okay, starve or don't starve, versus the monarchies we left behind in Europe. He created the first model of individual ownership in our country. And then, of course, he furthered it with the Louisiana Purchase and et cetera, et cetera. And that model exists today in the American ESOP. That ESOPs will outcompete their non-ESOP counterparts in America, but more importantly for our country, they will outcompete companies across the world. We want to outcompete Russia and China and India in the future. Make the employees owners. Make them responsible for their own success. And then the great part along the way is if you work at an employee-owned firm and it's successful, you ain't counting on no pension or 401k for your retirement. You are likely becoming a philanthropist yourself. Right. Social Security, pensions, 401k programs are designed to create non-poor retirees. They are not designed to create any semblance of wealth amongst our retirees or particular people who just aren't dependent on the government. And ESOPs are exactly designed to create wealth within people as they approach retirement. And so you can tell I'm passionate about this subject. I think it's not just for those firms who are considering it and how to get it done, but for the country overall.
So when will this book be out? Because I want to read it.
We have determined, my publisher is Ben Bella, and they are a fantastic publishing firm. I'm incredibly impressed with them already. Mm-hmm. But they and I have agreed that this is clearly a post-vaccine book.
Okay.
There'll be lots of book signings, lots of book launches, lots of big companies who will be interested, where I will attend, meetings, et cetera, to speak on the subject. And so if you can tell me, Randy, right now when I'm going to get vaccinated, then I can tell you when you can publish the
And I can't answer that. And you are the head of a 12,000, 11,000 person hospital system, and you don't know. So I don't think any of us know.
And actually, the University of Kansas Health System, we are one of the sites for Oxford University's vaccine clinical trial.
Okay.
So we have 1,200 people in Kansas City who have gotten that shot of the Oxford vaccine. 800 got a real one, and 400 unfortunately got the dummy.
Yeah.
And so we're midway through that phase 3 clinical trials. I'm really hopeful, I'll be honest, based on the people I get to talk to, including the folks at the National Institutes of Health, that there will be vaccines available for healthcare workers, frontline workers, like you said, the people who most deserve it.
Yeah.
November.
Okay.
I hope. Yeah. And then hopefully for you and me soon after.
Yeah, well, let's hope so, because I'm telling you, I am tired of wearing a mask. And, nowadays the new normal for us is telling our kids, I have 3 boys, and, making sure they've got their mask and their backup mask in their backpack. So, I mean, it's the new normal and the reality of the day.
I'm like so many, I don't want to live this way anymore. But I don't want to get COVID more.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
There's this word out there, that it's mutating, it's not as bad now, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there's not a better health system to go to with COVID than the University of Kansas in the world.
Yeah.
And we had people die last weekend.
Absolutely.
And so this is a terrible SOB.
Yeah.
And it's only going to be beaten with a vaccine. And so we need to do it as fast and as safe as possible.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So, man, you've kind of laid a lot out here. Is there anything else that you're seeing in the industry before we close out? Anything that you're reading in the tea leaves about where our industry is headed in the next 4 to 5 years? I think there's going to be a lot of change. I know we talk about, you can talk about Ray Kurzweil and the singularity effect and all this other stuff, and these massive computers that are going to be able to process way more information than any engineer or architect could process. But there's something to be said for good design. And I think human beings create good design. And I'm just curious to know your thoughts about where you see this industry headed in the short term, say like in the next, 3 to 5 years post-pandemic.
Sure. One thing we know is it will be changing.
Yeah.
It's always changing.
Right.
When I was an early engineer, there was an engineer, and for every engineer, there were 2 detailers doing drawings. Now, for every 10 engineers, there's only 1 designer putting those ideas into a 3D virtual smart database model. Mm-hmm. And so it's certainly changing but the biggest thing that's going to happen in our industry in the next 3 to 5 years, in my opinion, is the opportunity for explosive growth. And I'm not just saying that because of employee ownership, or even though I think it's the easy, no even questions way that these firms should go at this point. Interest rates in America and likely worldwide are going to be historically low, and they're going to be historically low for a while. There is no way the Federal Reserve can allow interest rates to be booming up with the national debt that the country has just taken on. And it will use everything in its power to keep those interest rates extremely low. Low interest rates, the country sort of taking a year off, the fact that we're falling behind on infrastructure in America, not just oil, gas, power, energy, the things that you think about, water, wastewater, environmental, transportation, and now with the coming changeover of energy sources in America, that's certainly going to occur as we start to come to the realization that the Earth is warming. That's not bad for the design industry. It's explosive for the design industry.
Yeah.
And so those who are getting good at what they're good at, the opportunity to grow and to grow fast for your people, for your owners, for your city, and for us, most importantly, for our country. It's out there, and it's going to be out there in a big way. CEOs in America who are bored currently because they don't have enough to do because of COVID, they better get themselves straight and be ready and be thinking bold. Be thinking bold. There's a reason the S&P and the NASDAQ are at record levels and the Dow's almost at record levels. The people who do all that investing aren't dumb. They know that the future is extremely bright.
Yep. And
it's bright here, right in our country. And the people who have to accomplish that are primarily at the design and construction firms of this country. So it's time to be ready to go.
Yeah, it sounds like you're telling every design firm owner or leader to have your track shoes on. So, I lied. There was one last thing I did want to ask you about. I appreciate that. There was something that you said to the young lady in this video, and I'll put the video in our show notes so people can watch it because I thought it was really good. It's only 3 minutes long. But she asked you, or I guess she was talking about the most important thing about being a leader. And you said something that really stuck with me because it's something that I talk about when I've done leadership training for Zweig Group or talked about it with anyone that would listen. You said leaders are listeners. And I don't know that we have enough listeners, in our organizations, because I think when you truly separate how you feel about something from the actual act of listening, the internalizing of what somebody else is saying to you, you gain so much perspective that way. And I don't think it happens enough. I don't think listening is practiced enough in any vertical, any industry, but, especially in the design industry, because I talk to people that are always saying, hey, I would say more, but, I don't feel heard anyway. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and do my work.
Yeah. How sick are you, Randy? This isn't just an executive issue in America, but it's an issue of, what did you say, Randy?
Right.
I'm dual tasking, texting, checking my email, et cetera. There were times, I admit, in Burns McDonnell officer meetings when I would have 3 or 4 important things to say at the beginning or the end of a meeting, and I would have to ask everyone to close their laptops. Right? My second favorite book after anything Jim Collins has ever read was a book I highly recommend you. It's called Fish. And it's about the Seattle fish market where they throw the fish, to each other. They throw it to their customers. They wrap it up. It's a very short book. It's 2 plane rides and you're done. Well, you could read it in a day if you wanted to. And you know how when the Notre Dame football players, they're going down the steps, going down the field, they all tap their hands and something that says, be a champion today. At the fish market, they tapped something that said, be present. So don't be distracted when your customer comes up and is looking to, decide between the cod and the salmon. Be present for that customer in that moment. And that means to listen, not hear them, listen to them, empathize with them, understand what their needs are. And executives in America, it has become so easy to be so distracted by all the things that you're interested in and all the things that you should be, that when you have that one chance to really listen, to do it.
Yeah.
You'll be smarter in the end.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's great. Yeah. I'm going to find that book and put that in the show notes as well, because that's something I have to read. I'm real big on working on listening, and I talk about it a lot. I mean, there's listening sins and there's active listening skills that if you put into practice, it will make a huge difference. And what you'll find is that people that you work with will start coming to you, confiding in you more, because they know that their words are not falling on deaf ears, and that you're actually listening to them, and that you will provide the appropriate response necessary. Or in some instances, you just need to listen. You don't need to say anything. You just need to listen, because we all as human beings need someone that will listen to us. And we only talk to those that we know truly do listen to us.
Well, and if your people are your most important resource, you should be listening to them.
Absolutely. At all times. at all times.
Randy, I so appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for taking the time. If anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Twitter.
Okay.
At Greg M. Graves. Twitter at Greg M. Graves. I have a growing following.
That's how we connected.
Almost every day.
Yeah.
Eventually, my website will come out when the book comes out. www.greggraves.com.
Okay, yeah, we'll link to that as well, and certainly when the book comes out, we'll be sure to highlight it. I'll mention it on the podcast, and we'll be sure to give it a highlight in the Zweig Letter newsletter. So I think people will benefit from that. But thank you so much, Greg. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be with us today on the Zweig Letter Podcast.
Thank you, Randy.
Okay. Well, folks, there you have it. Another episode of the Zweig Letter Podcast. It was so great to sit down with Greg and really talk with him. I hope you listened to what he had to share. He dropped some real nuggets, and we'll go over all of that in the show notes, and certainly want to encourage you to check out Greg. Follow him on Twitter at Greg M. Graves. And definitely we'll put a link to his website so that when his book does come out, we want you, all of the Zweig Letter Podcast listeners to flood Amazon or wherever you can buy his book and just order it for him. And so we know it's still a ways to go before it comes out, but when it does, we want to certainly be sure that you do that. That's all that we have for you. As always, we want to encourage you to continue to check out the Zweig Letter online at thezweigletter.com. You can also check out Zweig Group at zweiggroup.com. Remember, we're doing things on a regular basis. As a rising tide lifts all ships, that's what we're trying to do here, helping each and every design firm just be better. And we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. We know that there's a lot of things that you could do, but you've taken time out to listen to this podcast, and we certainly do appreciate it. You can always check us out wherever great podcasts can be found. We have over 170 episodes. That's right, 170 episodes of the Zweig Letter Podcast. So there's a little bit of something there for everyone. Check us out wherever great podcasts can be found. Rate and review the podcast, and we'll catch you on the upside. So we'll see you real soon. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zweig Letter Podcast. We hope that you can be part of elevating the industry and that you can apply our advice and information to your daily professional life. For a free digital subscription to the Zweig Letter, please visit thezweigletter.com/subscribe to gain more wisdom and inspiration, in addition to information about leadership, finance, HR, and marketing your firm. Subscribe today.